All right. Well, thank you guys for being here today. We're going to talk about the history of downtown Arlington's revitalization, which is a fairly recent history. We really, to understand it, have to go back to downtown's decline. We covered downtown's early years in our podcast with Geraldine and OK, but I'm hoping we can kind of go back and set this up a little bit for what's happened over the last, say, 30 to 40 years with downtown Arlington. But first, before we get started, I want to welcome my guests, and we'll let each of you do a bit of a self-introduction. Mary Tom, do you want to get started?
Sure, you bet. Thanks for having us, Maggie. Mary Tom Curnutt, and I am a sixth-generation Arlington resident, proud to still be here in Arlington, and I'm currently serving as your Justice of the Peace here in Arlington. Married, got 2 birth sons, some bonus sons, and just celebrated a great Mother's Day. So happy to be here and share anything we can about Arlington that we love dearly.
Well, and joining you is a 5th-generation Arlingtonite, your dad.
That's right. I'm Tom Cravens. Like I said, been here 5 generations. People ask me all the time, have you lived here all your life? And I say, not yet. So, I expect I'm going to be in the same house that I was born in. That's where I live right now. And I moved off for a little while, but I came back, and I'm really in the middle of downtown Arlington is where I live and where I've thrown my stake, and we've enjoyed very much of it. I was a banker here, been in insurance here, and been involved with the Chamber of Commerce.
And Tony.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's such a privilege to be here with all of you, including my favorite Cravens clan. I had the privilege of following in so many wonderful folks' footsteps and participate in the revitalization for downtown Arlington as actually the 2nd president for the Downtown Arlington Management Corporation. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I can't wait to see where we're headed, but love to talk about where we've been.
Well, we have a lot of stories to tell today, and you alluded to it, but I was the first president for the Downtown Arlington Management Corporation 10 years ago, but long before I was hired and long before you were hired and did the job behind me, Mr. Cravens was in the trenches for years trying to get something started downtown. And this goes way back. It goes back to when downtown first started its bit of a decline and a slide. So Tom, you're the one who's going to kind of help us set that stage. Can you tell me what was going on back in the 50s and 60s and how downtown fared during those times?
Sure, I can. And I think, when I grew up in Arlington in the 50s, downtown was the center of everything. We did everything downtown. There was all kinds of activity downtown. There was 2 furniture stores, Wares and Hayden Johnson, and there was 2 theaters, the Arlington and the Texan Theater. There was Eddie Williams clothing stores, Herman's, McKnight's clothing store, all kinds of things that we did in downtown that you don't realize that that's what your whole life was about until I went off to college in 1960. And when I got back from college and I went to work in downtown Arlington at a bank. And I started noticing that what I'd really grown up around was either disappearing and moved or were gone or out of business by this time. And many of those things I just mentioned were no longer even in downtown Arlington. So I got involved with the Chamber of Commerce, and we looked at doing things by committee. And when you do things by committee, you tend to do it once a month, and you don't do it 24/7. And when that started happening, then nothing was happening in downtown Arlington. And if you remember that the Parks Mall came about that time, Six Flags Mall came about, and that's what we sometimes call the malling of America. And a lot of people moved out of downtown and went to the malls and went to the outskirts of Arlington. So we thought, what can we do? The committees got together. We made plan after plan after plan. And, we had those plans for years, and nothing ever really happened. We finally got enough money together to have a 24/7 person in Lana Wolf that came in and worked for the chamber. And Lana started helping us put it together for maybe just events downtown, really not any major developments that happened when Lana was there, because we had no money really. We just had a little bit to do festivals and art festivals and that kind of thing in downtown. And then I think the thing that really changed is the committee gathered all the old studies, took them down to the city council one night. Mayor Cluck was there. You'll never forget this. He tells me about it all the time. There was about a 4-foot stack of plans that we had that were on display, and nothing had ever happened on any of them. So we finally got enough money together to do a study and get a TERS in downtown Arlington. I think it was number one. And when we got that, the funding came about to where we could actually have a dedicated form of funding for downtown Arlington. And that's when things really got started. So there were several people that really helped this thing get started and kicked off. After we went through the chamber, it was like Ken Devereaux came over from Fort Worth to help us get it started. We had Rose Jacobson, which was a downtown Arlington planner. We had Fiona Allen, who was a planner that came in and really got behind us. We had Mayor Cluck, who really did get behind us at that time to get all this thing done. And that's when things really took off. I think David Sampson put it great one time when David said, you know, all these plans you've had, Tom, he said, now I think they're all coming together. Where's all this traffic coming from? And this Ray Perryman, a former economics professor at SMU, told us one time, you know, it's amazing when the contagious factor of activity takes place and people like to be around other people. And when activity's around, things start to happen. And that's exactly what's happening in downtown Arlington now.
Well, that is such a great view when you talk about the contagious nature, because we've been on such a roll in the last couple of years, and there's been that contagious nature about everything. But you talk about all those years of plans, and I think it is important to note that Arlington is not any different from many other cities that experienced the same kind of decline and disinvestment in their downtowns in the 1960s and 70s with the proliferation of the highway system and the development of suburbs throughout America, and people could live away from the core, and our values were different. And you talked about the malling of America. This was something that was happening in cities across the country. And I do think that every other city that today has a successful downtown has a stack of plans that go back that many years. This was not unusual. And it is that layering and, that constant beating of the drum and keeping the fires burning. And you talked about Lana Wolf. I don't think we can underestimate the contributions that she made when she was running what was the predecessor of the current downtown organization. You mentioned it was just all volunteer. And so she was coming to work every day so that she could raise money so that she could come to work every day. That's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
And so in 1999, the TERS was passed, and that gave the city an investment vehicle to convince developers that they were serious about downtown. That was the first big sort of financial move, right?
That's right. So everybody took pride in what was happening down here, and that's what really got it started. Got it really kicked off, and we hired Maggie, and the rest is history. Maggie, and then we had Tony, and we've got a lot of good success with downtown.
So when I came here in around 2000, the TERS had been put into place, and the city had actually just completed a streetscape project that was intended to be a demonstration. It was that first block of Center Street right there in front of the old movie theater by the Vandergrift building. And with a fair nominal amount of money, the city made a significant investment and set the table, to test. If we do this, if we create great streetscape and we invest in the public space, will it attract investment? And it did. And I think that gave the city additional confidence, but it also gave us our first inkling of what the new downtown Arlington was going to be like. So Tom, I'm really curious about this. When I came here for my interview, I had a formidable interview team. The founding board members for the organization were yourself, Mayor Cluck, and Victor Vandegraff. And I'm curious, the three of you guys started this organization. You convinced the city to step up and put up funding. You convinced UTA to step up. It was before the Business Improvement District, which Tony got done. But what were the dreams and visions when you guys were trying to convince the first applicant to come here? And what did you want this downtown organization to do besides come to work every day and get stuff done?
Well, I think there was a vision statement that we made one time, and I think that vision statement, I may read a little bit of it here, but it's really what we really started with and what it is. The future of downtown Arlington should be a unique civic and ceremonial heart of the city with a strong link to the University of Texas at Arlington, and serves as a center for banking, specialized retail, government, and educational services, and provide diverse cultural entertainment offerings. And I think that's kind of what we've all worked on, and that's been the goal of the vision ever since we started, and it still is.
Well, that's a great vision, and it's very timeless. And I think a lot of people have shared through the decades kind of the same passion and expectation that our downtown can be a better place, can be a place for people, can be a place where we can come together. And we're starting to see that.
At least I don't have to explain to my friends now or people that move into town when they said, where's downtown Arlington? I mean, we used to have to explain where it was. We don't explain that anymore.
That's right. I'd like to think that we've knocked down the number of skeptics.
Yes.
And won over the believers, and we'll continue to do so. Mary Tom, can you reflect for just a few minutes, kind of the changes you've seen in your lifetime? And then I want Tom to talk about the lifetime of Cravens, because there's like streets named after your family in our downtown. I want to hear a little bit about just how rooted your family is.
Oh, you bet. And Dad can cover the really far back history as far as the Cravens family and the university and military academies and things like that. But I was the oldest of the Cravens kids, born here in 1966, and actually was born in the house that my dad was born in and is living in. And so, like I said, I've been here for almost 54 years. It's changed a lot. Even though I was born right here in downtown Arlington and grew up until I was about 8 years old on 2nd Street, like I could probably throw a rock from where I am right now. Arlington was small even then. We moved out south of I-20 out past Wimbledon. Wimbledon itself was a trailer house and there was nothing out there. We grew up on 20 acres after we left our home here. The Junior League of Arlington had actually been in the Cravens family home right here on Fielder. We leased it to them for I think $1 a year. And so they were there taking care of it. And that's where the Junior League really got started. And the beauty of that is that I've had an opportunity to watch Arlington grow, but I've been a part of it as well. And coming full circle, having watched what my grandfather and my father did firsthand to give back to this community, it's ingrained in us. And I remember Kristen Vandergrift told me one time, she said, Mary Tom, only the strong are to be left here in Arlington. They're either going to fight or flight. And it's hard sometimes to watch, a city go through everything it's gone through, going from small to large, going bigger, and then maybe correcting some mistakes we made in some of the mid years, the 70s and 80s, and then seeing what that future is based on, what I've watched really since about 94, 95, when I came back here to Arlington and got involved in the Junior League of Arlington and really started spending my time, talents, and treasures with helping Arlington.
What were the other tangible, visible things that you started noticing in those early years once we got going?
Sitting on a citizens bond committee to allocate funding for Abram Street and to watch the development that's happened there. To me personally, having been so involved with the Junior League and having had the opportunity to meet Maggie and to be able to take our anniversary gift fund and give it to the city and actually fund the fountain and Founders Plaza there at the Levitt, which was the anchor gift for that heart of the city vision. And the water element was huge. And then watching what took off from there, from working with the Levitt family and getting that in place, and then that bringing the entertainment there, just watching the development all along that strip there, and then Ryan Dodson kind of taking that master plan and working with the private public funding, starting with the Urban Alchemy area over in there, then to the Union, to the 404. It just keeps going with what his vision is and what his family, and Ryan's an Arlington boy. His family's been here for a long, long time. I think their first building was in 1940 when they bought something, and we can't be grateful enough for what he's doing and taking what Arlington wanted and transforming it. Just to watch the Urban Union take off and see Sugar Bees and see Urban Alchemy across the street, and then Legal Draft, and then it just keeps moving out and expanding. And I'm anxious to see everything else that's coming, which we're ready to get all this over so we can watch that happen. Yeah.
So Tom, one of the questions I had for the Cravens family, when I look at the tax rolls, the different parcels that are in our downtown, the original town was between North and South and East and West Streets. And then there were people that lived on the outskirts of the city limits. And your family was one of those that lived on the outskirts. And then eventually when you became part of the city, where your house used to be and the land around it, it got chopped up into parcels and sold off. On the tax roll, all those parcels are still called the Cravens edition. And that's kind of how I knew that you guys had a big foothold down here, kind of on the edge of town back in the day.
Yeah. Tony knows where the Cravens edition is, because I think that's where he hangs out every day.
Yes, sir.
You talk about Main Street. Well, my grandfather was one of the first physicians in Arlington, Dr. M.H. Cravens, and his office and his house was the end of Main Street. Dr. Cravens had a wife. Her name was Mary. He had a couple of wives named Mary because one of them died. But anyway, there was a Mary Cravens Carlisle and Mary Carlisle Cravens. I won't get into that whole story. But when one of them passed away, she was buried in the old Arlington Cemetery up off of, I guess it's East Street or Mary Street now. And the street was not in there, and he couldn't go see her, visit the graveyard. He had to go all the way around town to get there. And so he took his tractor and he plowed a road going up from his place all the way up to the cemetery. And it just ended up called Mary Street because he plowed it to go see his wife in the cemetery. A true story.
Tony, I want to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
We're very lucky to have been in the same profession and share the same job, actually, and then now to work as colleagues. But you were in charge of the downtown organization for, what, 8 years, 10 years?
It's like 7.
7. Oh, it just felt like 10.
It was great, every bit of it.
I know. And so you stepped in after I was recruited to another city. So we got things started, but you really took it to the next level. Can you talk about, where you were when you stepped into the job, what you saw as the top priority and kind of how things shifted more toward community building, and then maybe let that take you to how you ended up where you are now. Tell your story a little bit.
For sure. When I got started, I was so grateful to be part of a project that would mean so much to the Arlington community. I remember just walking into the chamber room and seeing all the faces after they said, "Hey, Tone, we're going to give you the job," and just feeling at ease with, wow, this is a big thing, a big opportunity, but knowing that we had so much ahead of us in downtown and all that we could accomplish. And I would say, I had the privilege of working for Bob Cluck in the mayor's office starting in about 2005. And, thinking about downtown from 2005 to when I started as the president of the Downtown Arlington Management Corporation, so much had transpired over that short period of time, particularly as it related to community building and really becoming the heartbeat of the community. And for me, it always started and kind of came back to the Levitt Pavilion. Gave people a reason to come downtown and be in community. We always generally refer to it as the living room for the community or the front lawn for the community. And it meant that people were coming downtown for more than just the library, more than just municipal court, for paying a speeding ticket or whatever. And so seeing community in that way just help further the revitalization efforts in downtown. So you started seeing the 300 block of Abram, kind of get finished and move along. And, you started to see some things behind that start to come to fruition, and more residential, was a priority and moved. For me, I always felt strongly that to be a unique place for our community, we need to embrace the cultural arts. And so that was one thing for sure that I felt strongly, that if we're going to set ourselves apart from any other place in the United States, we needed to have a strong cultural art community. And so we really leaned heavily on our cultural art partners, from the theater to the Levitt to the museum to the dance studios and the local artists, to really kind of dig into that a little deeper and see if we can't help sustain them and then see them grow over time.
And it was during your tenure that you guys applied for and received the designation as a Texas Cultural District.
We did. And it took us 2 tries, but we were darn sure going to get that thing because it meant a lot. For us, for me at the time, it really meant that we were serious about arts. And I wanted to show not only our community how serious about arts that we were, but also the artists who might look to Arlington as a place to do their work. I wanted them to know that, hey, we like art, we like artists, we want to build and strengthen our cultural art community. And so that was a big thing when we finally were able to get that from the state.
I think you've got that word out there now, and
Yes.
I think people get it. Okay, well, I would love to pick up on a couple of things you guys have both talked about. In those early years, after I came here in 2000 and we got the downtown organization up and running, yes, the Levitt Pavilion was the first big idea that started getting some real steam and started to physically take shape. What I saw happen along a parallel path in those early years was some real opportunities to recruit some new restaurants. And I'd been at work for about a week. I was in a little tiny office, and a really nice lady dropped in to visit me. She wanted to invite me to her church, which is a very Arlington thing. And she also dropped off a menu from this restaurant where her and all her church friends go every Sunday up in Burleson, called Babe's Chicken Dinner House. And after she invited me to her church, she said, honey, all you have to do is get this restaurant to open here and you'll have a successful downtown. And I literally put that in my inbox. I thanked her for visiting me, and I went on about my work. And I came across that menu about a week later in my inbox. And I on a whim picked up the phone and called and asked for the owner and got his name, Paul Vineyard. And I told him he was going to come to Arlington and open a restaurant. And we got to know each other, and I eventually introduced him to Johnny High and Bert Collins, who were redoing the old movie theater to be the Arlington Music Hall. And that was our first restaurant recruitment, because Babe's was a big, successful, growing chain. Cities across Dallas-Fort Worth were trying to compete to get him to open there. So for him to plant a flag here in our downtown, right on Center Street, was highly visible, and it was a big deal. And it sent a signal out to other chain restaurant operators that downtown Arlington was a good place to invest. So then I went and knocked on the doors at my friends who operated a little taco shop over by TCU called Fuzzy's Tacos. At the time, they only had one location. And I said, you have to be over here. We have this amazing university. You've got to open a store over here. And they came over and looked, and the only space we had that fit their needs was a Napa auto store that was vacant on Abram Street. And they said, we'll take it. We even like the blue paint. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And today, Fuzzy's is a national chain. We have over 75 locations. And I want to say that that is the most successful of their locations, even to this day. And, other restaurants, started being interested. I went and knocked on Shannon Wynn's door, very successful restaurateur who I knew from Fort Worth, trying to convince him to open a Flying Fish. And he said, I'll never do it without its own parking lot. And then after I was gone, Ryan Dotson convinced him to open a restaurant with a shared parking lot. So, there's been all this sort of creativity around some of those recruitment efforts. But I'm curious from all of you, what was the feeling like in those early years when we started to see those new restaurant marquees go up and we started to see that people were investing in downtown?
I remember when we started to get some of the very first restaurants. I don't know, and Tony, you can probably tell me, Maggie, too. I know Mellow Mushroom popped in, and that was kind of one of the ones that jumped out. I thought, really, this is not going to last. It's not going to happen. And then all of a sudden, we got Babe, and then it just kind of kept going. So there's a reason to go downtown. I work downtown. I get my pick of restaurants now, and it's something that I never envisioned happening when it used to be a furniture store and a bank. And that was about it in the 70s and 80s.
Well, and I don't think we can underestimate the influence of the University of Texas at Arlington. And it's had a storied history and been called all kinds of things through the years and been all kinds of things through the years. But it is today one of the fastest growing, most diverse universities in America, and one that is just tied to our downtown. Tom, I'm wondering if you can talk about the very unique partnership, the funding partnership that our downtown organization experiences in partnership with the city and UTA, but then also talk about the impact of the Special Events Center project.
Well, UTA, I've always said they created more traffic and more population in downtown than most cities could ever hope for in their whole career. But UTA, from the very start, has been an integral part of downtown. And for years, we had our backs turned to each other. In other words, we didn't open up the avenues between downtown and the university until these plans got started. And now those were starting to turn and face each other. The Levitt kind of came in and did that. The First Baptist Church opened both ends of their campus to it. the bookstore came in, UTA, and then years later, College Park came. All the kind of things that we need for a vibrant downtown came, and the university created a lot of that activity themselves. We had a one-way pair that we wanted to put through downtown. Tony, you remember that? And people were thinking one way, we don't want one-way streets, we don't want to do this and everything else. And we thought, well, what if we put a activity center in between these one-way pairs?
Yeah.
And it happened to be College Park, and that's where it ended up. And some of the early plans we have, you can go back and look at them. There was an activity center somewhere right in the middle of downtown Arlington. For a while, they wanted to move it somewhere else, but it came back, as we talked about a while ago, that Dr. Spaniolo convinced him to come back to downtown. And those kind of things that the city and the university used to have some diverse attitudes towards each other, and all of a sudden it really turned around and changed, and everything started happening. The administration over there, from John Hall, who's the business manager and can find more ways to do things than anybody I've ever seen in my life. He got a lot of things done that we thought could never be done. So anyway, I think that's kind of really what started happening down there, is we started facing each other and not have our backs to each other.
Well, and UTA's investments in downtown, besides the College Park Center, almost everything that has been done has been a public-private partnership,
Right.
where the city meets them where they are, meets the community, meets UTA, and we find a way to fund things sort of three ways.
You know, Maggie, one thing that people don't realize is when UTA went in and bought the old Watson's clothing store, and they changed it into their accounting facility, well, they also brought their security down there with them. And UTA police were, in downtown Arlington all the time there. That's one of the benefits that you never think about.
Absolutely. And all of these projects have had interesting mechanisms to get done. The Levitt Pavilion was named one of the best real estate deals of the year by the Dallas Business Journal. It involved a land swap between a city and a church. And I think the ingenuity that Ryan Dotson used on the furniture building on Abram Street was a similar kind of story. You know, the building, when I got here, had a church operating in it, and the rest of the spaces were vacant. And Ryan eventually found a church with a steeple somewhere else and convinced that church to relocate so he could bring in some restaurants. So we swap things and we partner and we trade, but that's how a lot of stuff has gotten done down here. Tony, I want to spend a little time hearing from you, though, some of the big projects that happened during your leadership, the city's investment in the new library, the housing that just blew up under your watch, and the support that you provided to make some of those developments happen. And then this whole idea of Abram Street, where did that come from? So can you tell us a little bit about some of those big things that happened?
Sure. I mean, frankly, it starts with College Park Center in the district. I mean, that was a $180 million mixed-use project that, again, was a partnership between the city, the university, and frankly, the First Baptist Church. It really demonstrated the ability for developers to come and do big things. And so you started to see more of those projects be announced, more residential projects be talked about, and then, developed and brought about. The big project was the library being redone, and the partnership between the developer and the city to be done at 101 Center. That was a huge accomplishment to take everybody to Kansas City and kind of see what was going on in Kansas City with their downtown and their library and all the residential growth, and just to be able to bring that back and describe. If you want to do a library on your own, it's going to take some time, but if we do this together with a development partner, we can get this done quicker for the community. It was a really huge win. And then, Abram Street always needed and wanted to be Main Street in downtown. And so for me, it never felt that way, right? It always felt disjointed. It always felt like a high-speed race to get from East Arlington to West Arlington. People would use Abram Street. So we just had to articulate a message where we could make Abram Street our main street and conducive for further revitalization downtown. I think it has meant a lot. I mean, they thought about Abram Street as Main Street for as long as I can remember. it was talked about, which, why they moved the state highway from Division, or from Abram to Division, because they were thinking about how to make Abram that really traditional Main Street feel. So I always thought of it that way. And so we just thought about the design that way. And so what does it look like to have a really true Main Street in Arlington? Unfortunately, for years, the first Main Street got bisected by, big buildings, the old George Hawks Library and City Hall. And so you couldn't connect Main Street again. So Abram became the de facto Main Street. And I tell you, I drive down it today and I'm so excited to see that thing get done, because it's going to mean so much to our community to connect east-west. It looks great.
It does look great. And it's really amazing to watch it come together, because it's a totally different place from what it was 10 years ago. I just can't imagine for anybody who was here, 30 years ago, wouldn't recognize it. Tony, you talk about the dreams and the aspirations, and you were instrumental in bringing the dream sculpture here, but you've had your own dream. You are now an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? How you went from being in the chair I'm in now to being a small business owner and apparently a serial entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, Maggie, I tell you, I loved working in downtown, and I love what it meant to build community. One of the things that I've taken away from that time was the value in bringing people together. And so for me, we can talk a lot about shiny buildings and, new cool things in downtown, but the biggest thing that I took away from the 7 years that I spent in that chair was the pride that people developed in Arlington. The fact that people would say, I'm from Arlington, and be happy about that. For a long time, when I was sitting next to the mayor every day, a lot of people weren't happy about being in Arlington, as I was his assistant. But over time, and as things progressed, and as you got a sense that downtown was on the right track, people really felt great about being an Arlington resident. So no longer did they say, I'm from Fort Worth or Dallas. They raised their hand and said, I'm from Arlington. I thought that was so cool. And so I guess at the time I felt kind of God tugging on me a little bit, saying, hey, maybe we can do this a little bit differently. And I'm not sure what that is yet, but maybe you should think about building community a little bit differently. And then, we hatched the idea to bring a coffee and wine bar to downtown, a place for people to gather from all walks of life, a comfortable place, a community living room of sorts. And so, we started down that path, and I'm grateful for that to this day, that for just what we've seen at Urban Alchemy for 2 years, and what we will see in the future in downtown Arlington, because we've been so well received, and I couldn't imagine another place to start my business, to be honest with you. It was a dream come true for sure.
Well, your business plan must have been good, because that is where the community likes to hang out. And it's the kind of place that every downtown needs. And we're really lucky that you're here. So thank you. We've talked about numerous people through the decades that have made significant contributions to downtown. We've talked about Mayor Clark several times, and he was the leader when I got here in 2000. But I also want to recognize Mayor Jeff Williams, our current mayor. He is carrying that wand and keeping the passion going for an even better downtown. And everybody's looking forward to when Abram Street reopens, and when we can gather again safely and convene as a community again in person. I do want to ask about the downtown master plan. The city undertook the creation of the most recent plan that was going to guide downtown's placemaking future. And that was done in the last couple of years. And I just got back here. I took my same job back last year. And the downtown master plan is in place. And Tony, can you talk a little bit about the significance of our current downtown master plan? Because I think it does a great job of aligning what you talked about, some of those placemaking priorities and being a place for people.
This new downtown master plan really took the great features from the previous one, which was done so long ago. It seems like maybe, I don't even remember, 2004-ish. And really did leverage neighborhoods and the interconnectivity of those downtown unique places. One of the things that has somewhat lacked throughout the revitalization of downtown has been, it's a little disjointed still, so you get great developments around, and it really needed to be connected in a physical sense a little bit more strongly. And so I think that's where this downtown master plan comes into play, and it really starts to talk about creating and leveraging those unique places, but also creating the connectivity that's really required to make it really a vibrant downtown. Because you can talk about Gilligan's and Urban Union and Mellow Mushroom and all the things that go on there along Center Street and College Park and 404 Border and all the things that are around. The challenge now is for us to really connect all those things together. And it started with Abram Street, and that's a really big project, and will help tremendously. But we got to start thinking about north-south connectivity. And I think that's where this new master plan kind of helps us get down the road a little bit, figure out how do we make those physical connections in a stronger way.
I think you are absolutely right. And we know that going forward, we want to have a parking problem in our downtown. And we know that, the transportation, the walkability, the access is going to really help guide that vision going forward. We're so fortunate to have a partnership with the city. Our city, I find, is pretty visionary and forward thinking, and ready to lead when they need to lead, and ready to let us lead on projects and initiatives when that makes the most sense. We're so lucky that there's been a long list of dedicated community leaders like all of you to kind of keep things going and keep our partnerships strong and keep this vision alive for downtown. It's going to be super important going forward, that spirit of collaboration that we have. And, I don't think downtown Arlington's story is over yet, but would any of you like to share any final thoughts or comments on what we might see in the future, both short-term and long-term?
Well, I think the economy, I'm an optimist. I think it's going to do fine. I don't think it's going to slow us down that much in Arlington. We've always had a way to survive. We always had a way to come back. And I'm just very optimistic about what's going to happen in downtown Arlington.
I'd echo that. I really feel good about where Urban Alchemy will be in 2, 5, 10 years. And hopefully, other businesses that we've been working on for downtown. So I'm excited to be in downtown Arlington, and I'm looking forward to having more projects come out of the ground in downtown.
Well, I'm super excited to have you guys as our guests today to talk about the history of downtown's revitalization. We can look all around the downtown and see buildings that weren't there before, and see new residential buildings finishing in their construction. That construction is still underway. We still expect new residents to move in later this summer. And we have new restaurants opening on the ground floor of the 101 Center. So the investment is not slowing down. The new hospitality building for the Levitt Pavilion will open with their concerts, socially distanced, of course. And, we appreciate everybody, keeping the fires burning and keeping the energy going for the future of downtown Arlington. So thank you for joining us on our podcast today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
And to close our session, here's a few parting words from our mayor, Jeff Williams.
It is a great day in Arlington.
Thank you for listening to this podcast on downtown Arlington's history. Please join us next week. We're going to be talking about the history of innovation and creativity in downtown Arlington. Our guests will include Michael Jacobson, the president and CEO of the Greater Arlington Chamber of Commerce, Miss Cindy Salter, the owner of Salter Brothers Coffee, and Scott Parsonen, the owner of Cadmus Dental. So please join us next Thursday at 4 o'clock on Facebook Live.